This episode of the Chris Johnston Show is brought to you by Sports Interaction. Get in on the action and make your bet with Sports Interaction, whether it's on the upcoming MLB playoffs or the start to the NHL season. With competitive odds, the best live in play, and more ways to get into the game, you can make your next bet with Sports Interaction. Head to sportsinteraction.com/SDPN or download the app to get started. 19 and over. Please play responsibly. September is here, and it's time to talk about self-care. When it comes to making an impression, proper grooming is essential to looking and feeling your best when you walk into a room. That's why the sponsors of today's show, Manscaped, are committed to helping men around the world walk and talk with some swagger this season with the best grooming tools on the market. Join the 9 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped and enjoy this offer, 20% off plus free shipping with the code CJ Show at manscaped.com. Don't neglect your beautiful self and get right with Manscaped. For the sleekest version of yourself, by the way, Manscaped has you covered from head to toe, starting off with this bad boy, the Beard Hedger Trimmer. Look, I don't have a beard that's as luscious and great as CJ's, but, you know, the smaller beard, this Hedger, we get along just fine. With one guard and 20 adjustable lengths, this device is the perfect travel companion to take care of your mane wherever you are, Maine. So get right with that. Also, the Performance Package 4.0 has a lot of great stuff. The Lawnmower 4.0 is in there, the Crop Preserver, groin deodorant, the Crop Reviver groin spray as well is great. The Manscaped Boxers 2.0, great for men of all ages. Enjoy the Performance Package. Once again, Manscaped supports the Chris Johnston Show so much, they provided an exclusive offer for you, the listener or the watcher on YouTube. 20% off plus free shipping with the code CJ Show at manscaped.com. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com. You just have to use the code CJ Show. Feel like yourself again and take charge of your life with Manscaped.
I know that some in our audience know the finer points of hockey.
The Chris Johnston Show.
We are your friends.
The biggest stories, bringing you inside the game.
What did you hear?
The Chris Johnston Show. Powered by Sports Interaction. Want to bet?
What is going on?
Here's Chris with your host, Julian McKenzie.
Part of the game.
CJ, we have a really packed show today. We're going to get to a lot of news and notes from around the National Hockey League. A very eventful day in Calgary taking place yesterday and even spilling into Thursday morning. We have to start there, specifically with some news that has really hit the hockey world hard. Chris Snow, the assistant general manager of the Calgary Flames, he has been battling ALS for the last 4 years. Unfortunately, this week, as announced by his wife, Kelsey, he suffered cardiac arrest and then suffered a catastrophic brain injury, depriving him from oxygen. And Kelsey provided an update Thursday morning that doctors say that he will not wake up. I'm very sad about it. I've not been in Calgary long. I've not had the opportunity to interact with Chris that much, but just hearing all these different stories and following his battle against ALS and then having it come to this point, I know I felt emotional about it. I've seen people in and around the organization feel very emotional about it, and we've seen an outpouring of support from the hockey world. CJ, this is it's a tough way for us to start the show, but we have to talk about Chris Snow and the legacy that he is leaving behind.
Of course. And look, there's no way to truly prepare for something like this. Obviously, this has been a terminal diagnosis. And look, Chris was fortunate. He lived 4 years with ALS, and you know, initially it wasn't clear if he'd live 6 months. And you know, part of that was due to some testing he did, or a trial drug that worked for a period of time and delaying the onset of his symptoms. But you know, this is something, of course, all those people you saw that were emotional, and the way I feel myself, you know this day is coming, but there's no way to do it. But you know, I want to try to put as happy a spin on this, or as positive of light as we can shine in this direction, because, you know, Chris is a special guy. And this isn't just saying it on the occasion of, you know, his death. Of course, you would expect people to sing someone's praises. But, you know, those that only met him, say, through his ALS battle. He and Kelsey have been very brave, I think, in how open they've been with what he's gone through, what their family has gone through. Have really let the world in on that. And I can't even imagine being in their shoes. I mean, it just would be impossible to imagine without being there that they were willing to do that. And I think that does a lot of good. I first met Chris a whole long time ago, 2004. It was the World Cup of Hockey in Toronto. And it's funny, he was a star back then, Julian. The World Cup was here. I was the young reporter. I'm pretty sure he was a couple of months older than me. Basically, we're very much in the same age band. And by that point, he was covering the World Cup for the Minneapolis Star-Tribune as the Wild's beat reporter. He'd already been a beat reporter who had covered the Boston Red Sox. Me at that time, I felt like I was doing something all right. I was like the number 3 guy at the Canadian Press covering that. And he was already, I say this lightly, but honestly, he was viewed as this up and coming star. He was, really obviously super nice guy back then, really humble. I don't mean that it was the way he carried himself, but he already was so accomplished. And then he did something almost, very few people are able to do, and jumped from a job as a beat reporter and initially worked for the Minnesota Wild and then has worked in Calgary all those years. I mean, this guy, kind of everything he did and everything he touched, I think he was ahead of his time in a sense, or was at the front of the class. And, we've seen that now, obviously, with his beautiful family. And as I mentioned, everything that they've shared. I mean, I thought it was quite touching. His son Cohen was at the press conference where they announced Michael Backlund on Wednesday as the new captain of the Flames, sort of representing the family. I mean, imagine being in his shoes. It's just anyway, obviously it's horrific news and it hits hard. But, for me, I choose to try to remember all the positive things that this man accomplished, the family leaves behind him. It's just awful. I hope that the Flames keep putting their arms around them and everyone that they're close to there in Calgary. I know they've been part of that community for a long, long time. Help them through as a family through just an unimaginably difficult situation. But then, on the flip side of that too, I think we should remember what a special person Chris was. And that was professionally, that was personally, and, really facing the ultimate challenge, this kind of illness, something that's running his family that he's seen claim people that have been close to him before, and the way that he faced that battle. I mean, what a legacy to leave. And the fact that as we're recording this right now, that he's still on life support, even though doctors have said he's not going to wake up because he's donating his organs. I mean, another sort of what I would say selfless choice that he and his family have made. And so, really awful news, unfortunate news, but just a top class person and someone who's going to be missed, in the hockey world, but well beyond it, of course, as well.
Very well said. I'll just add that as bittersweet of a feeling as it is to discuss Chris at this moment, it has been very precious and special hearing anecdotes from players, especially in Calgary, about Chris Snow. One that stands out to me, just coming from practice not too long ago, just hearing new head coach Ryan Huska talk about his relationship with Chris. Chris, before he moved up to AGM, was the director of hockey analytics in like 2011. And just as he continued to make his way up in the organization, when Ryan Huska was in the organization, Ryan shared with us in the media that those two would get into fights all the time about analytics. And it took them a while to eventually see eye to eye. And Ryan has eventually gotten to a point where he completely understands why analytics are necessary for coaches and teams to get better. I just thought it was really fascinating that you mentioned him being ahead of his time. He's a huge part of this wave when it comes to analytics being embedded in our game. He has done so much great work in terms of contract work for the Calgary Flames organization, an integral part of the regimes up until now and for this franchise. And it's really sad to really get to this point. But I like how you're putting it too, Chris, where we should be able to celebrate his life and we should be able to think of everything that he's done and just knowing about his work as a journalist and making his way into an NHL front office. That is amazing. And then battling ALS the way that he has, as admirably as he has, that's special. Honestly, that's brave. That takes a lot for a person to do. So
And Julian, look, he worked right until his final days, basically.
He
too.
did.
I mean, and obviously that's a choice that he made, something he wanted to do, something he's been passionate about. I mean, he got a title bump. He got vice president added to his title when Craig Conroy took over as a general manager this past offseason. And so, he's been an integral part of the management group for the Flames going back several years now. And, his imprint is still be felt on the team, of course, this season too. And so, there's no good way to die, I don't think. Let's just call it what it is. But he fought right until the end, and he was part of doing something that he cared about and an example for his family and his kids right until pretty much his final days.
Absolutely. I should mention it was arguably the most emotional part of this news day for the Calgary Flames. This is a day that started with us learning about Jakob Pelletier, their young forward, being out indefinitely with a shoulder injury. And we thought maybe that was going to be the story of the day. And then we see the tweet from Kelsey about Chris. And I could just tell from being around all the other media members, it just felt like a pit was all in our stomachs because we felt sad about this, obviously. And then to I guess maybe to kind of share a little bit more from that, but just the media members were all at the first on ice sessions for training camp. We had talked to a few people there. We had seen the tweet from Kelsey after that, and there was supposed to be a second on ice session. And yeah, I don't know how we were at least the people I was around at that point, we were all feeling really down, and I don't know how we were going to go about our jobs that day. And to see Flames PR kind of come out and say, hey, you know what, we're not going to do anything today. You could visibly see the emotion and how that had enwrapped everyone. And it was just really tough. And then we figured that's where the day's going to end. And then the Michael Backlund news comes out. It has been reported for days that he and his agent and the team had been talking about staying. And then it gets announced. I know, CJ, you were up on that first. And then eventually it gets made official that he's going to stay as captain with the extension in tow for the next 2 seasons after this one. And you could tell from the beginning of that press conference, Craig speaking about Chris, Michael speaking about Chris, you want to be happy for Michael. You want to appreciate the moment. I think everyone understood what was going on. It's just everything going on with Chris and the family in that moment. It was hard to ignore. It was hard to sort of separate from that. And I know we'll spend some time talking about the Backlund extension, the news dropping, but just really, really interesting to kind of take in all of these emotions all at once throughout such an eventful day, Chris.
Well, and when you look, naming a captain in any market's a big deal. In a Canadian market, it might be an even bigger deal. And, the PR and management team, I think you typically you try to plan that out, and you want it to be a big day for the organization, but there's certain things, of course, you can't plan for. And so what you're talking about is this all kind of unfortunately gets wrapped together. It should be noted too, Brad Treliving, the longtime GM in Calgary, who would have been Chris's boss and had a great relationship with him, flew to Calgary after news of this was announced. In fact, I was at Leafs practice on Wednesday, and it was notable that Brad wasn't there. This is, of course, before Kelsey's tweet had come out, because basically the entire management staff, other than Brad, who would typically be taking in the practices, wasn't there. But he's gone to Calgary to share his respects and to be part of it. And I mean, yeah, it's a tough thing. I don't know really what more to say about it, other than just a good man gone too soon, Julian. And the Flames, this will be felt right throughout the organization, I would expect, as they kind of continue on here in training camp and move towards the season.
Absolutely. We should say it here on behalf of CJ and the rest of the SDPN. We just want to extend our thoughts and prayers to the Snow family in light of recent news. We're obviously really sorry over what has transpired. And, we know the team will do its best to move forward. And for the rest of our show, there are other news and notes we'll get to. We know it's a Thursday show, so we'll get ready for the weekend and all that, and all for next week. But there's a lot to get to, and I mentioned earlier with Calgary, a really eventful day with Michael Backlund getting the captaincy and getting that extension. Is as best of a transition I know we could do. It's important that we were able to start off the show the way that we were able to do. But we do have to mention some other news and events that happened in Calgary. Let's get in on the Backlund thing, because to see him be captain, CJ, when it looked as if, we still weren't sure what was going to happen with his contract. When I spoke with his agent, JP Barry, before the weekend last week, they said the possibility of him staying was being discussed. No contract talks had started yet, but it seems as if in very quick time, within that short amount of time between the weekend and Wednesday, something came to fruition. And now Michael Backlund is the 21st captain in Flames history with the C on his chest. What do you think of how everything has transpired with the Michael Backlund situation to now?
Well, the only thing that was waiting on was Michael Backlund being willing to sign a contract, right? I mean, as soon as that was conveyed to the organization at the end of last week, this came together in a matter of days. I think that the Backlund camp with JP Barry and CAA Hockey had a pretty realistic view of where the contract would fall, where he's at in his career. I mean, Backlund, very near his mid-30s, only signing 2 years, not pushing for too much longer, I think makes the Flames more comfortable. He still has had great defensive impacts too. I think he remains a pretty impactful player in addition to some of the point totals he's put up. But I think once they got to the point that Backlund was willing to stay, the contract wasn't that difficult for everyone to sort of find agreement on. And it doesn't always go that way. But I think that this was really more about him getting to a place where he was willing to be with the Flames. I think that the coaching change in the offseason is a big part of that. Not to pin all this by any stretch just on Daryl Sutter, but just with the atmosphere around the team being so off last year. And I think Backlund almost feeling a little disconnected from the program, even though he'd been a member of the Flames for so long. After a few months of reflection and talking it over and thinking about it and getting back to the city to ramp up for training camp, I think he recognized that there was a new environment, which is something I'm sure you can speak to even just in your role being around them. But with Ryan Huska and his coaching staff, I think it's a real chance for everyone to turn the page. And he decided that he's got a great chance really to be a one-team player, which is rare for a player in today's day and age in the NHL. And then getting the captaincy, I think, is just a nice bonus for that fact. I mean, we talked about this 2 weeks ago. Before it was evident he was going to sign. Yep. He would have been the pick for captain. It was a matter of him, being 1 year out from the end of his contract. Now he's got 3 years remaining in Calgary, and got some no movement protection in that deal, and so have no reason to believe that he won't be spending those 3 years as the Flames leader into this next chapter for the organization.
I have a take, and you tell me if I'm off base here when it comes to Michael Backlund in this contract. So he has the final year of his current deal this year, and then after that, 2 more years. Doesn't that kind of put the window for the Flames at 3 years? Because you have Backlund, who's going to be, I believe, 37 at the end of that contract. Jonathan Huberdeau is 30. He's going to be still in his 30s at that contract. Nazem Kadri's 32. Mackenzie Weegar is going to enter his 30s as well. Andrew Mangiapane, same deal. A lot of those core players are going to be going from their late 20s, early 30s into their early 30s, maybe mid 30s. And as much as the team wants to get as many younger players in that core, and they're trying to do that now, we'll see what ages. Well, I mean, they'll get to their ages when it gets to the end of that deal. A lot of focus is still going to be on those older players. I kind of see it that way. I'm wondering if you think I'm off base, or maybe it's a little bit longer. How do you feel about the window for the Flames? Because essentially now, signing Michael Backlund, who said he wanted to compete for a Stanley Cup, this essentially means the Flames are they're doing everything with the intention of winning.
Yeah, and what else can they do? I mean, they're signed in long term with the Huberdeau, with the Kadri, some other guys on the roster. Even Markstrom's got a few more years. Like I
Yes.
think that they have too many good players to say they're going to put them in a team that's going to tank or be near the bottom, and they're locked in with good players. I mean, I'm betting on that because the Flame stock is low. I'm betting on that right now. I think that this is a team that's going to surprise some people this year. And so, yeah, I would think that gives you about a 3-year window where you would expect them to be trying to win the cup and to be making the moves that teams trying to win the cup make, which are more short-term style moves versus something with the long term in mind. I don't know if we would look at their core and say it's good enough to get the job done. I think that's probably the debate. But it was certainly good enough a couple years ago to be the top team in the regular season in the Western Conference. They got to the second round a couple years ago. I could see things breaking their way. And so, yeah, I think that is essentially the window. There's ways that could be extended, though. I mean, let's see how it plays out. If any of these young guys hit big, that could help change things. I mean, the Bruins window changed, from the team that won the Cup in 2011 when they got Charlie McAvoy and David Pastrnak. And they didn't get either of those players at the top end of the draft, if you remember. I mean, not in the first couple picks, And those guys hit and became impactful members of the sort of next wave for the Bruins. I think that's the goal for any team that's aging out, right? You're hoping that, maybe Dustin Wolf becomes a goalie of the future or something of that nature. But certainly I think in the short term, there's no reason to think the Flames aren't a playoff team at minimum. And then whether they can compete in the Pacific to try to come out of that division, play into the third round or for a Cup final kind of remains to be seen.
Dallas also comes to mind as well. I mean, in one draft class where we were able to get Jason Robertson, Jake Ottinger. It was Mira Heiskanen in that same class too. They got they got a top player at each position in the same draft class. And I get that's very lucky, but Dallas found a way to get younger players with their aging core too.
Right. And it allows them to even dream of a world beyond Tyler Seguin, who's still on their roster. But I mean, they can transition, I think, right into whatever that next generation looks like if some of their higher priced talent from the previous one gets to where they're less impactful, or maybe you're signing to those players at some point to cheaper deals or whatever it looks like. I mean, Tampa did this too. Kucherov and Vasilevskiy and these guys, weren't picked at the top end of the draft the way that Hedman and Stamkos were. And Braden Point too. So, I think that we've seen examples of it. It's really hard to do. It's hard to hit big on second and third rounders. I think there's a degree of luck. Obviously, all those teams would have taken the player in the first round if they knew better. But that's the hope. And look, there's enough examples to tell you it's possible. It's just, it's a little more traditional to tear it down to the studs and get Connor Bedard and build that way.
Yeah, well, there are only so many Connor Bedards. Only one Connor Bedard or a Connor McDavid or a Sidney Crosby. They only come by every so often. The only other thing I'll say about this with regards to Backlund and the Flames is Noah Hannafin spoke to us today. He says that he likes the changes in the atmosphere. We'll see what happens with him. And Elias Lindholm, where he's at. He wants his money. The one thing for me is just the Flames either have to find a way to sign those two guys, or when it comes time for them to replace them, they better replace them. That's basically what they've signed themselves up for the next little while here. It's never a dull moment around the Calgary Flames, it seems, when it comes to their roster, CJ.
It is not. And, it's going to be an interesting season for you there. You've come along to that beat at the right time. You saw the crash. And then you've seen a complete change in the front office, and we'll see if they can pull out of it.
Oh yeah, it's objectively very different. No one's walking on eggshells. People are cracking jokes. It's objectively a very different atmosphere. We'll definitely talk about that as the season goes on for the Calgary Flames. There are other news and notes we need to get to. We will get to You Can Bet That first, and then we will talk about Andrei Vasilevskiy and the back injury that has him out for the next 2 months. Welcome to You Can Bet That. Remember to hit up sportsinteraction.com/SDPN for all of your gaming needs. One line I'm looking at that's taken some interest for me. Who's going to win the President's Trophy this year, Siege? The Carolina Hurricanes are the betting favorite at 7.50. The Avs and Maple Leafs tied for the second best odds. Devils, we love the New Jersey Devils around here, fourth best odds at 10. The Oilers, Golden Knights, Bruins, Stars, and Kings follow suit after that. But what do you think about the Hurricanes being the odds-on favorite to win the President's Trophy?
Well, what I've learned in all these segments we've been doing the last few weeks is everyone loves the Hurricanes. Eh? I mean, it seems like every line that we get out, whether it's, futures on the Metro Division or the Stanley Cup, have the Hurricanes right up there. I mean, and I'm not going to chip away at that. They've been one of the league's better teams for going on a number of years now. And I think one of the things you're going to look at if you're considering this sort of wager is which divisions are going to be strong. Like, I think the Atlantic will be a stronger division. So that means whoever wins that division, I think they're not going to have as easy a time. There's not as many crappy teams there anymore, right, to rack up points. So it's probably less likely to come out of that division. I think the Pacific is similar. And so I'm not hating on the Central and the Metro, but I think that, beyond the top teams in those divisions, there are some weaker rivals there. And so I would predict as best I could that it's either coming out of the Central or the Metro that the President's Trophy comes from. So, the Canes fit that mold. The Avalanche fit that mold. I think those are good places to look.
All right. Don't forget to check out sportsinteraction.com/SDPN for all the best odds before game, in game, and the best props. Again, sportsinteraction.com/SDPN. CJ, we've got a lot to get to in the second half of our show. Let's start in Tampa Bay. Andrei Vasilevskiy out for the next 2 months with a back injury. Kevin Weeks was first on this. I know you've got a little bit more information on that. Wow, just a bit of a surprise to see when it comes to a man who has been such an integral part of Stanley Cup runs for the Tampa Bay Lightning over the years.
And an absolute workhorse, right? I mean, the last 4 seasons, regular season and playoffs, Vasilevskiy's played 44 more games than any other NHL goaltender. And, given where the league has gone, Julian, I mean, how many teams now really do truly use 2 goaltenders? I mean, a good, huge percentage of them. Tampa's been the one sort of outlier in that they've counted on Vasilevskiy to play a high number of regular season games, played basically every single playoff game. We've even seen him in some playoff blowouts refuse to come out of the net, right? And as admirable as that is, and I think it says a lot of great things about the battler that he is for that team, how much he means to that team, unfortunately, there's bound to be some price to be paid. And I think a lot of people were thinking that last year in the first round of the playoffs, when Vasilevskiy wasn't up to his usual level in that series loss to the Maple Leafs. And unfortunately, the thinking at that time was, well, if there's some, good side to Tampa finally not having a long playoff run, is a chance for everybody to get healthy. And to now be at this stage, really getting midway through training camp, and for him to have to go through a back procedure that's going to keep him out for those 2 months of the season. I mean, that's not ideal. And I do think that some of it has to be related to just the workload that he's shouldered. And so, for Tampa, there's not really an easy answer here. Yes, you could put, and I'm sure they will put his $9.5 million salary on long-term injured reserve, but you can't commit a lot of those dollars to another goalie because you need the space to activate him in December when he's healthy. And so reasonably looking at Tampa's roster, I think that they could have up to maybe a $2 million goaltender added, quite comfortably by opening night. Again, depending what they do with that opening night roster and how many players they send down. But I think you're looking at a stopgap solution, obviously, in that price range, whether it's, maybe do they go after one of the free agents that didn't get signed, someone like Yaroslav Halak, or do they sort of hang around the waiver wire, right? Because, we do see every year, some team's third goaltender gets claimed on waivers, Julian, for this exact reason. There's injuries in training camp. Teams need, NHL depth. That's one thing. We've seen it a lot in Toronto, frankly. They lost Curtis McElhinney one year. They lost Calvin Pickard one year. Aaron Dell another year. And they got Martin Jones, who's been around the league a long, long time, as their number 3 in this year's training camp. He's going to likely have to go through waivers at some point before the regular season begins. Maybe is he an option? You have Magnus Hellberg in Pittsburgh, who's played games and has been claimed on waivers a couple times in the last year or so. And so, I think that there will be options for the Lightning, but obviously, I mean, it goes without saying, you're not getting anyone at Vasilevskiy's level. And they have Hugo Onfeld and Jonas Johansson still in camp there. But, Tampa's going to have to get through the first 2 months, maybe protecting their goalies a little bit better. Certainly, they're not likely to have the sort of goaltenders you would count on to steal games. And quite frankly, that's what Vasilevskiy has been able to do for them over a long period of time. He's the biggest singular reason in my eyes, and they have a lot of great talent there. They got several Hall of Famers in that lineup. But I think Vasilevskiy is the number one reason they went to 3 straight Stanley Cup finals, because he was that good and he played so much. He was that reliable. You remember the second cup in 2022 that they won, or 2021.
2021, yes. 2021, yes.
Those years blend together a little bit in my mind, given the whole COVID thing. But, had like a shutout in every deciding game, right? He was just unbeatable when they needed it, when they had a chance to end a series. And so, the good news is it's not the whole season. There's lots of time on the other side of those 2 months. But the bad news is, Tampa's aging out a little bit as a team. The division's getting stronger. You have Ottawa and Buffalo, amongst others, pushing up. How do the Lightning get through that period of time? I think it's going to be fascinating.
I believe today's the first day waivers is back up and running, right? And Spencer Barton, a goaltender out in Vancouver, is on the waiver wire. Is that also an option we can throw for the Tampa Bay Lightning to consider as well?
I mean, he's there and he can be picked by Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern time. I'm sure that they're working through all their options. And but reasonably, as I say, we're talking about them acquiring another team's number 3 or maybe number 2 goalie, most likely. So, it's going to be by committee. I think there's no other way unless there's a big surprising trade in the hopper, but I don't see that. I mean, the Lightning are extremely well run, but they have no cap wiggle room. And that makes them like a lot of teams, but they really only have a small window that they can fit someone in here without some major surgery or a bigger style trade, which I just don't think is the way Julien Brisebois will operate. And so there's 2 ways to look at it. It's going to be a great chance for whatever goaltender ends up there because it probably could be some, a veteran, maybe someone coming off waivers and gets a chance to play for a team like the Lightning. But, it's a big spot for them to have to overcome this because Vasilevskiy is that important to their success.
Absolutely. Speaking of free agents, Patrick Kane still available for teams to be signed, working out in the GTA area, I believe. What's new with him? When's he expected to sign with anyone? We know he might not be available for some time due to injury, but what's the latest with him?
Well, and how about the video that CAA Hockey, his agency, put out? I don't know if you saw that on Wednesday because you were busy with a lot of other things going on. But yeah. I will say this is rather novel, and I don't mind it. Look, he's had a significant hip resurfacing procedure. He was not the Patrick Kane of old last season. I don't think that there's any mystery about that. Wasn't able to find any magic even after the trade to the Rangers because, he was hampered physically. And you get to his age, 34, turning 35 in November, and there's going to be some questions about how effective he can be. And so there's a little sizzle reel there, if you didn't catch it, of him doing, turns and work on the ice and then a lot of off ice, weightlifting and maneuvers, really showing the strength he's been able to build up in that hip area. And I think it does create a little bit of a buzz for someone who, I think we're looking at October, you're going to keep hearing Kane news because, I would expect that he's going to be doing some interviews with teams, choosing his next spot. It's sort of interesting, like signing during the season, and I'm not second guessing it by any means, but there's not every team that could bring him in. Look, I think there's lots of contenders that would love the idea of Patrick Kane on a reasonable contract, but a lot of those teams don't even have the ability to sign him to a reasonable deal. And look, things could change. This is the flip side of signing him during the season because, one or more of these teams might suffer a significant injury to a player that commands a chunk of their cap space, and they're able to use LTIR or other mechanisms to create the room to sign a Kane. But, there's not that many contenders in my eyes, or even if we don't say contenders as the bar, really good teams we know will be good, that have cap room that could be dedicated to Kane. A team like Carolina looks like they might be able to do it. Buffalo, which, of course, has been talked about a lot because it's where Patrick Kane's from, and the fact that the Sabres are trying to take that next step. It looks like they'll probably have the cap space, I think, to get in that game. But, a lot of the other teams, as we're projecting it right now, do not have the space to sign Kane. And so I think it's going to be interesting to see how this one plays out. It's still looking at a November, December timeline probably before he plays. But I could see him signing some point within the next month. He's certainly not expected to sign before the season starts. And, it looks as though the best news that we have is that all the reports of his recovery and rehab are extremely positive. He looked pretty darn good in the video that was put out there. And we'll just have to see who actually has the ability to go out there and convince him to sign with them. Because he's not eligible, I should mention, Julian. He turns 35 in November. But he can't sign a 35 and over contract by the rules because you have to be 35 by June 30th of that year. And so next year at this time, it would be easy for teams to sign Patrick Kane because you give him league minimum on his salary and you can build in all kinds of bonuses that can be pushed off into the future he's not eligible for that type of contract. And so, it's a player that I think a lot of teams are curious about, but I just don't know how many of them can truly bring him in midstream.
I have the video at the corner of my eye. I pulled it up as you were explaining it. He does look fine with his skating and all that, and I see the exercise videos as well. How do you have a sizzle reel of Patrick Kane and you have very little of him stick handling? Remember those videos of, forget which company it was with, but he's stick handling around all those pucks? Like, how do you not have that in your sizzle reel? That's all you're missing.
I didn't speak to the director of it, so I'm not sure how the decisions were made. I'm guessing.
I'm not yelling at you, but like, come on.
The teams are most worried probably about how he can move, right?
Yes.
I guess we're at a point where we have enough highlight footage of Patrick Kane doing ridiculous things with his hands. The hands aren't the question. It's does the body put him in a position where he can use those hands again? And let's hope for his sake that's the case. I mean, we'll have to see how this goes down here. But this is different this is up in the game for an NHL. Like, I don't remember this ever happening with an NHL free agent in the past. So
no.
he and his agents are selling him a little bit, not just in conversations behind the scenes, but in the public eye as well.
Yeah, I don't hate it. It's just there was a little something I was missing. Anyway, let's go to the Anaheim Ducks. Trevor Zegras, the RFA, still in need of a new deal. What's the latest on that front?
Well, it's not going well, right? I mean, we can say with both Trevor Zegras and Jamie Drysdale, it doesn't seem like the status of negotiations is particularly positive at this time. And you're getting now a week into camp. The regular season's getting closer. I mean, this is where these negotiations get a little more difficult. I think one thing you're always looking at are the players remaining steadfast in their position, or are they getting antsy? Are they hearing from their teammates to get back and just take whatever deal? I mean, we'll have to see how that materializes. It certainly seems like Zegras in particular is rock solid in terms of his belief of where he's at. The sides have discussed a shorter term deal. I think both are comfortable with that, but it doesn't sound like they're anywhere near the same ballpark when it comes to money. And, I do know there was a meeting this week to further discuss that contract, and doesn't seem like there was much progress made there. And so, it would be foolish at this point to predict how it's going to go, but it's starting to look like a team with two pretty good young players are starting to face a real possibility that one or both of them won't be there to start the season. And you wonder, will there be some sort of trade talk? I mean, I don't get the sense it's gone that way just yet, but sometimes some bad feelings get involved in these sort of processes. And I think it's worth now us just keeping a monitor on how things go, because I do think that certainly the Ducks have the ability to sign them in terms of the cap space. They're one of the teams, if you go to your favorite Puckpedia or Cap Friendly page, they do have some space to play with here, but they're being pretty heavy-handed in where they give it out. And look, they have that ability. I mean, it should be said. You're talking about players with very little leverage in the system.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in Drysdale's case, because he was injured last year and only played a handful of games, he's not even arbitration eligible for 2 more seasons. And so, the team does have a certain amount of leverage because there's not too much these players can do other than withhold their services. But it does seem like both are pretty comfortable this time withholding their services.
Okay. All right. So, yeah, a bit of a weird one in Anaheim. I'm still surprised that it's gotten to that point with both of those players. I mean, I know they're years away from contending, but could you imagine being in Anaheim and you're like, man, we have Jamie Drysdale, we have Trevor Zegras, we have Mason McTavish, we have all these young players, and it's like, you still have to figure out a way to sign at least a chunk of that core. Like, I would be feeling very uneasy if I was an Anaheim Ducks fan right now.
Well, and look, they signed Troy Terry to a big deal earlier in the offseason. It's somewhat reminiscent of what we saw in Toronto, where the Leafs, acquired all these pretty promising young prospects at the time, but then they all need to get paid, right? And it didn't go smoothly necessarily with William Nylander. Even Mitch Marner missed a day or two camp before he signed his second deal. It is the difficult thing that teams that bottom out and accumulate prospects do face. I mean, it's great to get those players, but then how do you pay everyone? How do you keep them happy? There's a dynamic between them. Naturally, they're teammates, but you're saying, well, if you're paying him this and I do this, and I'm not saying this is just about Troy Terry gets this deal and Zegras doesn't, but I mean, all that factors into the conversation and how you manage it. And on top of that, you got Pat Verbeek, who's only a year and a little bit into his tenure as a general manager there, kind of an older school guy. spent a lot of time with Steve Yzerman, both as a teammate years ago, but, working as his assistant GM in Detroit in recent years, and even was with him in Tampa for a period of time. And so, I think it's a case of, a difference of opinion about when a player should be paid in his career and how much he should be paid.
We've addressed it on the show, man. Pay now so that way it doesn't hurt you later. That's my official stance on it, but there's a reason why I'm in the spot I'm in and I'm not a general manager. CJ, I have a Leafs question. Am I allowed to ask Leafs questions? Go ahead.
I was going to say, well, it's been a funny camp for the Leafs, hasn't it? I don't know if you've kept an eye on it, but I mean, I got to say this right out.
Go ahead.
I feel for my colleagues that are there every single day, having to produce content every single day and stories, because there's, it's sort of like the Oilers and the same thing. Like, I don't see a lot of true storylines. There's not a lot of real roster battles because of the cap and because of how good the teams are and how deep they are. And so you get a lot of, it seems like the goal song might be the biggest story in camp.
That was my Leafs question, actually. What's the mood with that? Are we going to see a change with the song? Is it going to stay? Was there ever any point where the Leafs said that they were going to consider it? Because all I see is people saying it's bad and saying that it needs to be changed, and maybe people are hoping that it will eventually get changed.
The organization has never, to my knowledge, said they were going to change it. Like, right. anyone in a senior position to make that decision, whether it's Brendan Shanahan or maybe a little bit down the pecking order, it seems like the last 2 or 3 years, this has been a preseason storyline. Part of it was fueled. Someone asked Austin Matthews a year or two ago if they needed a new one. He's like, yeah, I'd be open to seeing it change. Like, he didn't say, it was not a strong opinion, but it was enough where he opened the door that I think a lot of people took that as full license to start saying, here's the 802 songs that could be said, or this or that. And again, sorry, because Josh Cloak wrote a story on this in The Athletic, and I'm not making fun of Josh. He's doing his job. But then it's like, right. But I'm just saying, it's all the spin out. And Josh, I think, put forward 25 songs. I read his piece. He actually was really thoughtful about, Toronto-based artists or songs that reference Toronto, or he actually put thought into it. It's not just like some little clickbait thing. But then he drops that story, and then it's like an echo effect. It's everywhere. So yeah, I don't think it's changing though. I got to be honest. I mean, maybe it is. I don't use my bullets when I'm asking favors or looking for info. I don't use a bullet on the goal song. So I haven't asked anyone way up the chain if it's changing, but I just don't get the feeling they see a need to change it, to be honest. And I actually Googled this, Julian, like best NHL goal songs. And there were 2 separate stories last spring where media outside of Toronto ranked the goal songs, and one had it number 1 and one had it number 2. So it's kind of weird to say, but it feels like in the market, there's some people that are pounding the drum saying they have to change it. But like outside the market, some people think it's catchy and a good use of a goal song. So take that for what it's worth.
Oh man. Now I feel, because so Mark Lazarus, myself, and I think Scott Powers got in on this too. We did a ranking of goal songs, and I have to remember specifically where we ranked the Leafs. I know Seattle was number 1 on that list, but I'm trying to remember specifically where we ranked. The Senators were actually second on our list. If we give you a few moments, I'll figure out where we put the Leafs goal song. But I have 2 thoughts on this. One, the players should have enough sway in that locker room that if they really don't like the song, they should go to management and figure out a way to change it. I think of when the Montreal Canadiens 2 years ago, their intro song for the longest time, you go to the Bell Center, it is Fix You by Coldplay. They started the season with Bulls on Parade by Rage Against the Machine. It was very different, and not a lot of people liked it. And then before a game against I think it was Nashville, they changed it back to Fix You, and we spoke to Joel Edmondson about it. We spoke to actually, no, Joel Edmondson wasn't there, but Brendan Gallagher said that Joel Edmondson in the background was making stuff work. And that's a bunch of Canadians. If the Canadians can figure out a way to make that work, the Leafs should be able to find a way to make that work.
I got to stop you right here. The fact it hasn't been changed, doesn't that tell you the players don't really give a shit?
Yes.
You can't tell me if Austin Matthews or Mitch Marner, William Nylander, any of those guys went to management and said, we got to change this. There's no way management would put their foot down and be like, no. Like
We're keeping it there.
I think the fact that it's remained the same tells you that the players, for the most part, either don't really care or they like it or whatever. I think it's apathy. And I'll say this. My only take ever on this, going back a couple years, is the Leafs put this in when they had some of the best truly young talent in the league. And I just thought it was kind of weird to have like an 80s song when you have this like stylish young team, like Matthews and Marner and Nylander, they all have a certain way of like dressing with flair. Like I kind of thought you should let them choose something that's more current, but I mean, they didn't, and that's fine. And I'm really ambivalent. They could change it or not. It's not going to change my day.
I'll say this. I don't have a problem with the song. I actually think it's kind of cool that they have that song there. It's funny. It's catchy. It's nice. They could get a cooler song. And I'm with you on the fact that getting a younger, cooler, more hip song, I'll go through the list that Josh put together. I'm sure there's some really dope ones. But Hall & Oates, that's not bad. It's fun. It's like a cool, like, fun bop you can bop your head to. I don't hate the song. Come at me, Leafs Nation. You don't have a bad goal song. It's fine.
And again, independent reporters from other media, like from other cities, are ranking at the top. So I think it's just insane that it takes on this much life. And here we are giving it life, Julian. We probably talked about this more than like the rumors and stuff. I mean, look at that.
We did. We got to be careful about that. I don't think people were happy about the fact we started with Taylor Swift last time.
I know. I got a lot of hate about that. Let's move on. Let's just not repeat that.
Yeah, we don't have to do that.
Let me tell you a story, though.
Please, tell me.
So, how many preseason games have you been at, and you're like, this really doesn't matter? Or like, what are we doing here?
All of that. I've never been to a preseason game where I've been there and I'm like, this matters. Maybe the Flames had a 10-0 win over Vancouver on the weekend. Matthew Coronado got a hat trick. It was cool that we were there, but we know like it doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. That's as close as it's gotten to.
Right. And I'm with you. Like, obviously, you're watching individual players, how they're progressing, maybe if lines are gelling, all that sort of stuff. But, like, generally, I think our view is, like, the preseason is kind of a bore.
Yeah.
So get this. Earlier this week, the Islanders and Rangers played a preseason game on Tuesday at Madison Square Garden.
Mm-hmm.
And someone had asked me, they're like, hey, what's the Rangers lineup for this game? I looked at it. I was trying to help this person out. Is in the hockey world. And I'm looking around. I can't find anything. And then start to ask some people. And this is not confirmed, I have to say. I didn't go right to the official sources. But what a few people that should know what was going on told me is that because it was the Islanders coming to the Rangers, Lou Lamoriello refused to disclose his lineup prior to the game.
You have
the Islanders were putting out their lineup. The Rangers responded. So we had preseason gamesmanship.
What are we doing?
It might have benefited the Rangers. They went up 3-0 in that game in the first 5 minutes.
It's preseason. Yo, Uncle Lou, what are we doing?
I'll say this is somewhat unconfirmed. This is a little bit the rumor mill and hearsay, but I just thought it was funny that we, most teams, quite honestly, put out the roster the night before. These are mix and match teams. Even at this stage of preseason, some of these lineups are half junior players or AHL players, even some ECHL players. And obviously this isn't game 7 of a playoff series or even game 1 of the regular season, but my sources tell me that there was a little preseason gamesmanship between the Rangers and Islanders, which is, I think it's hilarious. I actually think it's funny. Like,
it is.
Like Lou Lamoriello leans into the bit, right? Like he is who he is. He does not change. He's got his rules. They're infamous by now. He's 80 years old, still an NHL general manager, doing it his own way. But I love that it appears anyway the Rangers might have refused to put their lineup forward then because, we're not tipping our hand in this Rangers-Islanders battles in the preseason.
Is it Is it off base to say that Lou Lamoriello, look, man has been successful, was won Stanley Cups, but especially in the last few years here, is it off base to say that sometimes Lou Lamoriello's his rules, it's kind of Larry David like I just picture like Larry David at the front office just being like, well, if they're not, I don't need to disclose my lineup at all. Like, what am I doing here? Like, why does Lou Lamoriello have to run things like an episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm? Like, what are we doing here?
Because it's worked would be his answer, I'm sure. You know, he put it this way. He does keep information under lock better than anybody.
Yes.
He gets everyone in line. And trust me, my whole job is to try to get information unlocked before, the team wants it out there. But he had like players signed a couple summers ago and like no one knew about it. And they're just sitting there and they announced it all like in September because of cap reasons. Like he does things his own way. And I should say this too, Julian, because I don't know if you've interacted with Lou much.
Never.
He's a total gentleman. Honestly, it can be a little frustrating covering his teams because our job is to find out information and it's not always free flowing to the degree that you'd like to make your job work. But he is nothing but a gentleman when you chat with him. He was among, in the days that I traveled basically to every Leafs game, he was among the most chatty of the Leafs GMs from those eras. Like he would come over to you on whatever, Tuesday in the press box in St. Louis and like, have a chat with you over a coffee and like he would seek you out and not, my point is this. I think the people that work for him respect him and largely like him or maybe unanimously like him, but he just has his way of doing business and you're not getting him out of it. And that includes apparently the whole thing about the roster. So anyway, I just shared that for a bit of levity because,
yes,
we've talked about some heavy subjects in today's show, but that made me laugh when I kind of stumbled into this one the other day.
I appreciate you sharing that story. And by the way, I've never interacted with Lou, but I think he is, when you look at his resume, I'm not going to question that resume. I will have questions about some of the antics, like the beard stuff, but for those who have seen me on another podcast know exactly what I'm talking about. But all that to say, I have nothing but respect for Lou Lamoriello, and I would imagine that he would be a gentleman if we were ever to encounter each other. I'm not here to throw shade on Lou Lamoriello. So that I'm just need to say that before Islanders fans pop up in here and start littering our mentions and the comments. You don't want to mess with Islanders fans, CJ. You don't want to mess.
Oh yeah.
With No.
Well, I don't have any reason to. I mean,
exactly. It's better off we do that. It's better off we don't poke the bear. Okay, we don't do it.
I'm not going there.
But I'm glad we had that story, and I'm glad we were able to have all the stories and insight on another edition of the Chris Johnston Show, episode 185. By the way, we are 15 away from 200 episodes of the Chris Johnston Show. You excited for the milestone?
I am, yes. I've just learned we can't go too heavy on Taylor Swift in the opening. But other than that, we're still learning. That was my response to a few people like reached out personally. I was like, hey, you got to experiment and find things out.
Yeah, you know what? It happens. It works out. Sometimes it doesn't work out. We tried a ting. Anyway, we'll try more tings on Monday. Get your questions in for Ask CJ, whether through Discord, whether through Twitter. However you get us questions. Send us messages in bottles if you want. What's another popular method of communication that doesn't involve our cell phones?
Discord.
I said Discord already. I was just trying to be funny on that one. I said Discord and Twitter already. Let's try to find a random one that like people don't do, like Morse code or something.
Yeah. I mean, get them in somehow. Send a letter. If you get it in the mailbox by today, I'll probably receive it by Monday.
Send a letter to Chris Johnston. You know what? Like, if you put on like a Santa Claus beard, you could do like you should do like for Christmas, like letters to Santa. That'd be pretty funny.
I'm available. If you need me for your company party or whatever, I can dress up. I don't even have to dye this beard anymore.
All right, let's get out of here before the people get mad at us. For CJ, I'm Julian. So long and peace.
The Chris Johnston Show.
Powered by Sports Interaction. Want to bet?
Inside the Game, twice a week. Follow Chris on Twitter @ReporterChris. And follow Julian McKenzie @JK McKenzie.
The Chris Johnston Show.